Good morning, everyone. Um, this is a very long title for a workshop, but this is a workshop that we at Ally Path developed earlier this year as a response to what we saw happening across multiple campuses. And so I'm excited to bring this to you today. What I always like to do every time I present is begin with what we call a grounding moment, in which we kind of bring ourselves into whatever space you're in. I know for me, even though I'm at home, there's still a lot going on. And so taking a moment to settle, to bring our bodies into the space allows us to be more open and present. And it's something I like to do just even in every presentation for myself to begin. So I'm going to invite you into this practice. If you're able to, if you're willing to, I just ask that you kind of place 2 feet flat on the floor. If you're able to sit up in the chair, if that's possible, if that's something you'd like to do, you can do that as well. Wherever you are, whatever posture you're in, kind of bringing some attention to the breath. And so I like to close my eyes. If you want to open your eyes, you can, but just kind of taking some deep belly breaths. A lot of times when we're in moments of stress or chaos, there's a kind of high chest breath that we do that's kind of like, that's the anxiety breath. And so we bring the belly breath in to kind of deepen and kind of settle into our body so that we can all be more present. And so that's going to be the invitation this morning, is to do that for a few minutes. I'm going to do it because I need to do it, and we'll move on after that. So I'm going to take a couple deep breaths. Another invitation is if you want to, you can hum. That also kind of relieves some anxiety and stress on the out breath. So breathe into the nose and out through the mouth, but taking those deep breaths to kind of get settled into the space. So we'll do that for a few minutes and then get started. All right, thanks for doing that with me. The second thing we're going to do is a check-in, which is a practice I like to do as well in all the things, in all the presentations I do. I like us to feel as though it's not just me talking, it's also about us as a community meeting. If we were in person, we would be talking maybe at our tables and things like that and checking in. But I also want to hold space for that at the beginning, because I don't want to launch into a bunch of stuff, without first checking in. What's the temperature? Take the temperature of the room, of the space, of each other collectively, individually. And so that's what we're going to do next. And so we're going to be going into breakout rooms, and we're going to spend about 15 minutes checking in with one another around this question: how are you doing today? Now, that can be as open or as limited as you want to say. Everybody will have around 5 minutes to share, because we'll be in groups of 3. Share as much or as little as you like. I'll leave it to you to keep track of the time, make sure people get the time that's allotted to them in the 5 minutes between the 3 of you. But really, this is just a moment to touch base, right, and to kind of see where folks are at, and to see where you're at coming into today's talk, given the title, all that stuff. So we're going to be breaking into those breakout rooms, and we'll bring you back, and we'll get started with more of the content. So have fun. This is supposed to be light. If it's not light, it's okay too, but it's not supposed to be super heavy. But take the time to kind of see how everyone's doing, and then we'll get started.
We'll be going to breakout rooms right now.
Hi, Justin.
Hi, how's it going?
Hi, good. I'm sorry, I was in breakout room 5, but my computer, like my desktop, doesn't work with microphone. So I had to change
Okay.
to my laptop. Oh, there it is. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. All right, Justin, I'll bring everybody back.
All right, sounds good.
Excellent. Yep. Sorry, they have the 50-second counter, so.
Okay, no worries.
That was not 15 minutes.
That was 5 minutes, Fariba.
Yeah, I thought we had 15.
Oh, we went a little bit faster? Well, we'll make it up on the back end if we didn't get the full 15 in there. That's okay.
15 seems like it would be a long time.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a long time, but I like it because it gives folks the time to kind of get used to talking and warm up a little bit. But we will have some more time to talk, so don't worry if there is. I think we'll be in different groups, but it'll be good. So.
I'm sorry. I just think we're so excited to see people we haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
No, that makes sense. I understand. I understand entirely.
Okay.
Yeah, we got a big block of talking at the end here. So, all right, do we have everyone back or?
I believe so.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. All right, thank you, Cyrus. Appreciate you. So we're gonna keep going here. A little bit about me, quickly. I've been with Ally Path for about 5 years now, and I went to Loyola Marymount, right down the road there. I also write. I've written for the Los Angeles Review of Books. You can read my essays on race and politics there, and I also am a professor as well. I'm at Cypress College. And I also have written for Long Read. So I do writing, I do trainings, this is kind of what I do, and I teach as well. So English. But really, when I do this work, wherever I go to do these types of trainings, the question is why? Like, why do I do this work? And the reason why I do this work is for these two dudes right here, my sons. I always say that the reason I do this work is not necessarily for me, right? But it's for the people down the line, right? At Ally Path, we often say that we are planting seeds for trees we may never sit under, but that doesn't mean that we do not plant them all the same, because the trees we sit under today exist because someone had the forethought to plant the trees, right? Knowing that they may never see the fruits of those trees. And so when I go into any training, when I'm doing this work, I'm thinking of descendants, right? Because my ancestors thought of me, and I am here because they thought of me, and they planted seeds for me to sit under, for trees for me to sit under. And so I want to do the same. So that's kind of my thinking. That's how I kind of enter this work from that perspective. Wherever I go, whatever I do, it's framed through that lens. Facilitator assumptions. First one is that we're all peers and equals. And I share this so that there's a kind of sense of where I'm coming from in doing this. I may know some things, right? But we all know things. And so that's what we'll talk about. Because I don't have all the answers. What I'm going to be sharing today isn't going to fix everything. That's not necessarily the goal or the intention or the possibility of it. But I also don't think you have all the answers either. And so there's not an expectation for that. But we do have some of the answers, and collectively we contain an enormous amount of wisdom, expertise, and experience. One thing I want to do today at the end is to co-create and to build using what I bring in with my tools, with what you already have in your knowledge and your expertise, to kind of create some solutions and some new thoughts and some creative imaginings for what could be possible in the future. And this is an important part of an ongoing conversation. I know that you at SMC have been in this conversation for a long time. And so this isn't the end or the beginning, it's another step in that journey. And I think that it's important. And again, we're planting those seeds and continuing to plant orchards, right, of trees that we may never sit under, right, but that will benefit people down the road that we may never even know. It's so, when I think about that thought, I'm gonna go back to that real quick. It's so interesting to me because, you know, we're talking about generational thinking, right? 7th generational thinking. People that will never know you. They will never know anybody who knew you. And yet you can make an impact on them, because if we look at our current climate, our current situation is the result, right, of the decisions of 7 generations ago, right? And we deeply feel those things. And so the impact can stretch very far down the line. And so that's kind of how I like to think of this work, right? That we're casting vision, we're casting intention down the line for people that will never know us, but will know the choices we made and the decisions we made, right? And so that's kind of the vision there. So finally, we're all at different places, right? This may be your first training with Allied Path. You may have seen Veronica do the training I'm doing before. Like, there's lots of different places that you could be coming at. And so that's just true. And so I want to hold space for that and acknowledge that that's true and that that's okay. And then I'm happy to be here with you wherever you are coming from. So I want to talk about the current moment a little bit more. When I think about the current moment, the term grief is one that comes to mind. And I want to bring up this article and bring it into the space just to name what I know I'm going through in the last 7 months. And hopefully there's some resonance for you there too, and just naming what may be being felt. And this article is from March 23rd, which, if you know the timeline, right, that's a very interesting date to kind of have this insight. But even as I was preparing today and seeing, oh, is this still resonant? I think it still is. It resonated with me, so I hope it resonates with you. And the reason why I do this is because I don't want to assume that we're just going to, again, jump into content without acknowledging perhaps what some of us may be feeling around the current moment. And so the title of the article is That Discomfort You're Feeling is Grief. And I will give a PDF to Cyrus that Cyrus can share out to the group afterwards if you'd like to read the whole interview. But it's with David Kessler, who's an expert on grief. And I'm going to read a couple of the questions and just put them out there as a resource for you, because it's definitely been a resource for me. So Harvard Business Review said, you know, people are feeling any number of things right now. Is it right to call some of what they're feeling grief? And Kessler says, yes. And we're feeling a number of different griefs. We feel the world has changed, and it has. The loss of normalcy, the fear of economic toll, the loss of connection. That's what we were just talking about, right? We haven't seen people in months, right? And so we want to be able to connect. We want to see them, right? But we haven't been able to. This is hitting us, and we're grieving collectively. We are not used to this kind of collective grief in the air. And so I think what Kessler speaks to me in saying, what I hear in that is that oftentimes we have our individual griefs, right? We have our personal losses. We have the things we go through in our families, in our relationships, right? And we have to hold those things and hold space for those things now on top of the collective, right? The collective grief of the losses that we've had. And those aren't just losses in terms of death, right? It's also losses in terms of relational connection, the ability to move as we want to. Things are different, right? And so we're just not used to this collective grief in the air, and it's difficult. And so I appreciate Kessler naming that. And then HBR says, you know, you said we're feeling more than one kind of grief. And Kessler says again, yes, we're feeling anticipatory grief. Anticipatory grief is a feeling we get about what the future holds when we're uncertain, right? Anybody feeling the uncertainty right now? I know that's very high for me, right? And there is a sense in which the uncertainty is part of life, change is part of life, right? These are things that we all can kind of say, but there is a heightened sense of this right now that I think this current moment speaks to. And he goes on to say, I don't think we've collectively lost our sense of general safety like this. Individually or as smaller groups, people have felt this. but altogether this is new. We are grieving on a micro and a macro level. And so I love this framework because it gives us permission to feel a feeling that we may not have noticed we were feeling, right? Oftentimes, we allow ourselves to feel grief around certain things, but not around other things. It's a term that some psychologists call disenfranchised grief, where there are types of things we're allowed to grieve socially, culturally, that's appropriate, but there's other things we're not allowed to grieve. But the grief is there nonetheless. And so one of the ways that we can help ourselves through it is to acknowledge that we are grieving the fact that maybe we haven't eaten in a restaurant in 7 months or whatever the thing is, right? That's something that's okay to grieve. And the practice that I like to bring to grief typically is one called self-compassion by Dr. Kristen Neff, who's a professor at the University of Texas, I believe. And she talks about these 3 steps, and I can send this as well to Cyrus, but the first step is to, and it's a very, if you're familiar with the loving kindness meditation or loving kindness practice, it's a variation on that. But when I feel this type of grief, the first thing I say is, you can put your hand over your heart too, to give yourself some of that connection to yourself, but you say, this is really hard right now. And you can even say your name. This is really hard right now, Justin. And just breathe and just acknowledge it and name it. This is really hard right now. And then the next step she talks about is to say, and I am not alone, or I am not the only one going through this, or I'm not going through this alone. There are people around me that I can reach out to, right? I'm not by myself. As isolating as this may feel, and as difficult as this may be, I'm not alone, right? That's the second step. And I always like to pause in between because I like to rush into the last step just to get through the hard stuff. But pausing in the more difficult moments, right, to get into that feeling state. And then the third step is, and it's okay to be kind to myself today, or it's okay to be generous to myself today, or it's okay to sit down and rest for 30 minutes with my eyes closed today because it's hard, it's difficult, and I'm human. And giving ourselves that permission to kind of to go a little bit more softly through the day or gently through the day or whatever the thing is, right? So that we can kind of give that compassion that we need to kind of move through this really difficult season, right? And so that's a practice that I like to use. It's a 5-minute practice that you can kind of use in your tool belt. And it doesn't require, it's free, you know, it doesn't cost me money. And so it's a really helpful thing for me. But it's something I keep returning back to during this season. And it really helps me kind of work with the grief and work with the difficulty and the uncertainty. So that's just something I want to name and bring and give to you all as a resource, because it's been a great resource to me. So we're going to be talking about Peck's True Community Model, which Peck is just a person who's done a lot of thinking around community in his book, A Different Drummer. And we're going to be talking about this framework. Some of you may have heard it before or familiar with it, and I think that's great. And I think the differing levels of familiarity is also helpful, because then we can dig in a little bit deeper. Again, this is a tool, not a cure-all. It doesn't solve all the problems. It doesn't account for every single problem. It doesn't necessarily have the solutions for every type of problem, but I think it's an interesting framework for looking at specifically the current moment, but also just moments that we can look back in the past and see, ooh, like that's in our community, I can see that playing out in this way or that way. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. At the end, we'll kind of come back. You're going to take what I've given you in this tool and then kind of use your own experience to kind of generate what do you think could be helpful from this tool in your own work that you're doing now, because I think it's one thing to have this information, it's another thing to see how applicable it is, right? As opposed to just having the information. But it is going to be a little bit of me talking for a minute here, just kind of laying out the framework. Bear with me. I'm going to hold the questions until the group session, and then we'll do those there. But if you have questions, definitely write them down, bring them into the group especially, and then we'll also bring them into the kind of talk back at the end for the whole time Q&A. So this is the kind of layout of the framework. And if you start on it starts in the bottom left with pseudo community, and it moves up through factions. I'm going to be calling factions chaos in the talk today. It's kind of in the literature, it's both. And so I'm going to be calling it factions or chaos in my side, and then emptying, and then true community. And so what this is a kind of way of framing group development. So whenever you're in an organization, it could be a family, but we're going to be thinking about a workspace today and looking at the ways in which, or a college, right, a campus, how communities move through these different phases. And so I'm going to be describing the phases, and the invitation from me to you is, as you're listening to me, begin to think of some examples. I'll be sharing some examples for myself. But if you can think of some examples, that's usually pretty helpful for the group session at the end, because I think as you begin to think about this, you begin to kind of see, oh, this is a moment when I experienced that, or when we went through this or that. And it's helpful in kind of identifying where you go from here, right? If you can think of those personal examples. So that's the invitation. Okay, let's see. So when we think about pseudo community, it happens when we first meet. So think about the first day you started at Santa Monica, right? The first day you walked on campus at SMC, like what? Maybe not the interview, right? But the first day on the job, right? This is what happens. Typically, we're really happy to be together, and we're just really anxious to get along. We focus on all the things we have in common, and we're enjoying one another's company. It's that first kind of like, hey, how you doing? So great to have you. Come on in. This is a great space. You're gonna love it here. Everyone's great. Everyone loves each other. We work great together. Everything's fine. We love it. It's perfect. We're so good together. You know, that's kind of the energy, right? I remember when I first started at my college, and when I've worked at other places as well, there is this kind of energy around like, this is the best place to work on the planet. You are gonna love it. Everyone loves it. People love it. It's great. We all love it. It's a lot of repetition of the same stuff without going much deeper than that, right? But we're just really happy to be together. And it's that kind of, I think we refer to it as a honeymoon phase, right? Where we're just kind of enamored with the idea of what we think this place is, right? And that might be a multitude of different reasons, right? It may be the job that we've always wanted. It may be a pay increase. It may be we like these people in the interview process, or, you know, there's all kinds of reasons for that, right? And it's not wrong or bad, but it's just typically where most groups start out, or what happens when you enter a group, how it feels, right? But again, this is what Peck's going to be calling pseudo community. So another way of thinking of that, I like to think of it as like kind of community, sort of community, right? Not the kind of community that's true community that we'll be getting towards. And we'll get into why in a second. In this state, we oftentimes believe we're a community already, right? We think that because we're together, because we work in the same office space, because we're in the same department, because we're in the same campus, right? That we are a community, right? As opposed to a collection of individual people working in the same space. And I'm going to be using community in a very specific way, right? But this is what Peck is arguing, is that when we think of it this way, when we're in sort of community, kind of community, we're not technically in community yet, right? He calls us being in a collection of people. Because the feeling in this space is like, we're all so alike, right? We all agree on everything because we work on the same campus and work in the same field and have the same interest, right? And on a deeper level, right, you kind of focus on the positives, you focus on the things you agree with and the things that you connect on, and you kind of discount the things that you don't, or you just don't know them. And the rules of sort of kind of community, right, is don't say anything that could offend anyone else. And if you are offended, act as though you're not bothered in the least, right? And the reason why this rule is unspoken is because if you say something, you upset that delicate balance, right? You upset that kind of pseudo community feeling that people are having. How can we be all so much alike if you disagree with something that somebody says? Come on, you gotta be a team player, right? come on, get on board, right? That's the kind of mindset that we're talking about. Now, what are we getting on board to? What kind of team are we on? What is the goal of the team, right? Those are all questions that maybe we're not necessarily asking because we're either new or that's just the way things have always been, right? That's kind of the thought there. The rules allow for a smoothly functioning group, but it creates a lack of intimacy, and the longer it lasts, the more untenable it becomes, right? So as you begin to kind of stay at a place for longer, you know, 4, 5, 6 months, a year, 2 years, right? The hey, how you doing begins to feel a little bit flat because you're like, I'm not doing great. I just dropped my kids off or whatever the thing is, right? But there's not really space for that because it's like, wait, don't bring that here, right? This is a professional space, right? Not a personal, right? We make a demarcation between the professional and the personal, right? Leave that at the door, bring in your smile, bring in the thing, you know, you go, right? You do that thing, right? The smile thing. And that's what we're encouraged to do, right? I often talk about pseudo community like a golf cart, right? A golf cart is a great vehicle for a golf course, right? It's great for a golf course because golf courses are perfectly manicured. They have the paths, they have some hills, but those hills are built in there on purpose, right? And they're not too steep. They're built to be not too steep for the golf cart. That's the point, right? So it's completely controlled. And so in a sense, if you're in a golf cart in a golf course, you're like, everything's great. We're moving, we're going along, we're functioning, everything's moving smoothly, right? But when you think about it, right, you're operating in this space that's based on the denial of differences between individuals, right? This assumption that everyone has the same opinions about everything. And as we know, that's not true. So there comes to be a point, right? At some point, the rubber's got to hit the road. And that's chaos. That's chaos. And I think we can all speak to the first moment, maybe in a workspace or in a relationship in which you hit the chaos space. Sooner or later, conflict occurs. And we begin to notice we like each other less than we thought we did. Now, we don't necessarily say this, right? And it may not be conflict between two people, right? It could be conflict within the organization or the organism, however you want to think about it. But sometimes we take exception to something someone says, right? And then we think back to the pseudo community. The rules are don't say anything, right? Don't upset the balance. Don't rock the golf cart, right? And so the chaos moment, the factions moment occurs, right? When we take exception to something someone says, and it's a moment in which individual differences are right out in the open, only now instead of trying to hide, the group is attempting to obliterate them, right? This is the contentious division meeting. This is a contentious meeting, you know, town hall, right? This is that moment in which we can no longer act as though we agree on everything, right? But we don't know what to do with the fact that we disagree. And so the temptation is to obliterate the difference, right? And that could look like a number of different ways, right? It could mean silencing. It could mean, all right, everybody just get in here, vent what you feel, and that's it. Which ends up being super harmful and traumatic for everyone, right? Because you have 10 plus years, 15 plus years, 13 plus years, 5 plus years of pent up pseudo community frustration exploding in one meeting, right? With nowhere for it to go from there. And so but it doesn't move anywhere, right? And that's something that Peck kind of talks about. In this stage, we dare to disagree and we become frustrated with other members of the group. How could you think that? I thought I knew you. I've worked with you for fill in the blank. How many years? What? Right? We become frustrated. Now this can happen quickly. It could take a long time, but eventually it does happen. And so what do? We try to help and heal others. You know what? I'm going to help him. Let me tell him the right way to do this. You know what? If they only listen to me, if they only did it the way if I've been doing this a long, right? We get that feeling of like, it's our job. We are the right way. I am the right way, right? If they would just listen to me, then all of this problems, all these things would just dissipate. We're not alike, but I can help these people, right? And that's a really difficult place to be. I remember working with an organization, and we were talking, it was a college, and there was some interdepartmental issues. And part of the issue is that everybody thought that they were the ones who were right. When as an outsider, when I came in, I was like, whoa, you did what? And in response, you did what? And then you did what? And you did what? We had this kind of, you know, escalating things that were all done, right? But at the heart, if you talk to the people on either side of this issue, right, all of them are saying, like, I'm not the one at fault, they're at fault. If they would just listen to me, then this would all go away, right? And it created this stuckness, right? Because no one was willing to actually come to the table and have an actual conversation. Every time you came to the table, it was a soapbox, a space to air the grievances that they felt. And some of the grievances were righteous ones, right? But they were both feeling them. So then what do we do with that, right? Pseudo community does not have, it can't handle this, right? I mean, we're in LA, right? I'm in LA, actually. I don't know if I named that, but I'm in LA. But you drive 2 hours and you get to this place called Joshua Tree. Some of you have probably been there before. There are these huge boulders. I just went there this summer with my sons, the national park. It was beautiful. But imagine taking a golf cart out there and trying to scale those boulders with a golf cart. That's essentially what happens when chaos hits, is that our pseudo community can't handle the terrain, right? And we get frustrated and things break down. In this stage, the motive is to convert people to our way of seeing things, the right way of doing things, as a way of resolving the chaos. And when I say resolving the chaos, I'm talking about the discomfort. Chaos is uncomfortable, right? For all the critiques of pseudo community, it's very comfortable, right? You can kind of come in and be like, all right, I kind of know what's going on here. I don't love it, but it's better than the unknown. It's better than uncertainty. And so the tricky thing about chaos is that it comes in and it kind of upsets the apple cart, right? It disrupts the way we've been doing things. Even if things don't have that intimacy, even if you have to separate personal, professional, things like that, right? There's a way in which it's been working, it kind of works. And so we kind of resign ourselves to it. But the reality is that when we think about chaos, the fighting is better than pretending you're not divided, right? This is the learning point that Peck brings to this, is that even though it's painful, it's the beginning, right? And so in today's talk too, I'm going to be framing a chaos moment through the pandemic, right? And through the destabilization of the pandemic, and then what's happening around racial justice in this country, which has been happening for 400 years, right? But we're talking about another moment of attention on it. These are moments of destabilizing both, or chaos, right? They're destabilizing moments for us as individuals and for us as a culture and a society. And yet, if we look back, right, it would be disingenuous to say that the things that are coming up, the issues, the problems that we're seeing, it would be disingenuous to say that those weren't there on March 7th or on the day before Memorial Day, right? If we think that these problems started in the moment of these events, right? That's not necessarily the most honest way of looking at it. And so what chaos is actually doing is it's showing us, it's revealing to us, right, the things that we can grow through and that we can grow into. It's showing us that we're in a golf cart, not an off-road vehicle. Now, that may be a painful thing to realize, and we can go back to grief and we can say, wow, I really thought we were in the vehicle that would get us through some hard times, but it looks like maybe we're not. This is really hard right now. I'm not alone in this. It's okay to be, right? We can grieve through that reality, right? And it's painful, but it's the beginning of being able to say, okay, do we want to keep doing things this way? because when push came to shove and the chaos came, right? I was just reading the story of the Three Little Pigs to my kids, right? You know, and there's a conflagration of variables there in that story, right? But when we think about the House of Straw, right? Yes, the wolf blew, but it was also a house of straw. Like, is this what we want? Like, do we want communities that when faced with chaos cannot maintain, right? That cannot hold the center? That's really what Peck's asking, right? And so chaos, this is called the wall, right? This is what I like to call the wall. He doesn't really name this as being something that's in that's there for in his theory, but I see this happening within organizations. I've seen it happen within my own relationships, right? Where you exist in this revolving cycle between the first two stages, right? Pseudo community chaos. Meetings go sideways. People leave smiling at each other, but we talk behind each other's back, right? Something happen. I mean, I can't tell you how many times this has happened, both as a consultant and also as a human being, right? Where you're in a space and you're like, did that just happen? Did they just say that? Right? And your heart is racing, right? And your nervous system is dysregulated, right? You're in fight flight mode because we can get into this, right? But it's taking you all the way back to when you saw people fighting as a kid and how that made you feel, and the uncertainty that brings up. Is like, everything going to be okay? Is this community going to survive, right? And people are saying things that they maybe have never said before, right? And it's this very scary moment for us. I'm just naming what I felt. Maybe you felt fine, but this is how I feel, right? In these moments. And then the clock hits 12 or 2 or 5 or whatever the time is, and we all walk out, right? And we walk back to our spaces and we say, hey, have a good weekend. You know, I'll see you on Monday. And then we turn to our person, man, I can't stand them. Can you believe what they said in the meeting, right? And then Monday comes, like, hey, good morning. How you doing? Did you have a good weekend? Oh, great. So great. Kids okay? Okay, awesome. Have a good rest of your day. And what happened in the meeting is never addressed, right? No one ever brings it up again until you get to the next meeting, and then maybe that same person does the same thing again, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, did that just happen? Oh, have a good weekend. You know, and that's the revolving cycle, right? And I've come into spaces where this has been going on for years, right? The same 7 people, right? And I reflect on getting to a job, you know, where I was in an equity position, right? I was working with multiple people on campus, and I was looking at maybe some possible partnerships, right? And so I go to my boss, who was an admin, and I said, hey, like, I think that if we put this position with this position, and we've linked up and kind of worked with our athletes in this way, that would be a great partnership. The boss was like, I can't do that. And I was like, oh, is that a bad idea? Would those two departments not work well together? And they're like, no, actually, those two people haven't talked to each other in 10 years. And I was like, oh, okay. So we're not going to be able to do the thing for the students because these two individuals don't talk to each other anymore. And they're like, yeah, that's right. I was like, oh, okay, all right, back to the drawing board, right? But that's, again, and that's not a judgment, right? That's an observation of the ways in which the traditional work world is set up in such a way that these types of cycles continue, right? We do not have the vehicle, again, to go back to that metaphor, right? To be able to work through and get through types of breaks like that at work. Like, it's just not set up that way, right? And so that's just more of an observation, not a judgment. And I've been in that same space with people, right, at work. And so I'm not saying I'm above this or I'm outside of this. This is just kind of how we do stuff in American work culture. And so one of the things that Peck is naming is that we can begin to ask ourselves, especially in moments of chaos, is this what we want to do? Is this what we want to continue to do? And so I'm going to give us a minute to just let that sink in. If you have a piece of paper, perhaps you can take a minute and just write down a moment of chaos, sorry, a pseudo community situation that comes to mind for you, right? and then a chaos moment that comes to mind in that same community. So just take a few minutes and jot down an example from you, as personal or as not personal as you want. You could even use our current climate as an example, right? But just jot down an example, right, of a pseudo community and a chaos moment in that pseudo community that comes to mind. So we'll be continuing to think about these examples as we move through. And again, I guess the invitation is not to hold them with judgment, but to hold them in observation, and not to shame, not to blame ourselves or anyone else, because we have not been given many examples of other ways of doing things. I know I wasn't given any, and so holding grace and compassion for both ourselves and other people that we know for what we've been given, what we've inherited, and what we've been able to do with it, I think is helpful, is more generative than the judging, right? And the shoulds and the shoulding and like, oh, we shoulda, right? Now that we have information, now we can make different choices. That's the invitation here. So what's on the other side of this wall, this revolving door between pseudo community and chaos? Emptying. So this is a phase that Peck calls emptying, and it's a giving up stage. It's a letting go. It's not necessarily a time of giving up in terms of like I'm quitting, right? But it's a moment of acknowledgement. What you're letting go of is not the community. You're not giving up on the community, right? You're not giving up, you're not giving up on the group, right? What you're giving up is clinging to the pseudo community, right? Wanting that to be the thing that works. You're acknowledging, right? Instead of being like, no, this golf cart is gonna make it up this boulder. Just hit some more juice, put some more juice on it, try harder, make it, just back up and speed up, just try again, try, right? It's acknowledging that this is not working. Or the flip side is, it's like we talk about with the self-compassion practice. You know what? This is really hard. I'm giving up trying to act as though this is easier and that I'm fine and that everything's good. Like, no, this is actually really hard. I'm struggling. I'm not okay with this. Right? It's a time when we stop judging, right? And trying to help one another and accept that we're all different and that we don't have to agree or be the same. Now, this is where I think, if I were to have a critique of Peck's model if I were to raise up and transcend it a little bit, look over it, right? I think we do have to ask ourselves, what are our values, right? Because in times of chaos, in times when our nervous systems are dysregulated, when we are in fight flight, when we are scared, when we are being triggered in traumatic ways from old traumas, right? The question of values becomes really important. Not necessarily beliefs, but values. Like, what kinds of people do we want to be aspirationally in the world? What do we value? What are our values? And so, for example, is clear communication our values? One of our values? Is reciprocity one of our values, right? When we have these moments of emptying, right, we can say, this is who we want to be in the world, and that's how we're going to make a choice moving forward, as opposed to I'm right, you're wrong. Now, I guess this is where the critique is that when we say we don't have to agree to be the same, it flattens everything a little bit, I think, to make it sound like all beliefs and all views are all equal in the sense of like they all have the same political, social, economic, emotional impact. And I don't believe that to be true. But I think what Peck is saying is that we're acknowledging the fact that we are different. Like, that is true. And that's one of the things that pseudo community doesn't really acknowledge. It doesn't start there, right? Emptying becomes a space in which we begin to say, you know what, we are different. So now that we can acknowledge the difference, we can move on. There's a Zen saying, I believe, I don't want to butcher it, but it's like, this being so, now what? This being true, so what? Right? Now what? What do we do? Now that we know that this is true, how will this influence how we move forward? It's also a moment of recognizing that apologizing for impact is not the same as admitting negative intention, right? And so as organizations, as individuals, we can sit in spaces and we can say, you know, I didn't mean for this to be the way it went out, but I can see now that it had an impact on you, right? It's like when you're in a relationship with someone, maybe it's a family member or a friend, we say things, do things all the time that are received negatively. And even if you didn't have the intention, right, of negative impact, it's still okay to acknowledge that, because if we're caring about the other person as well as ourselves, we care the fact that what we said impacted them in a way that maybe we didn't intend to, right? And admitting and apologizing for the impact is not the same as apologizing and saying that we intended to do it, if that makes sense. But emptying is a space where we have the freedom to do that, and we give ourselves the space to do that, which is a very powerful thing to do. And it's one of the ways in which I talked about those feuds, right? It's one of the ways we can begin to work through those feuds, because at that point, when you begin to talk about years of things building up, there are probably, I'm guessing, going to be, like I said, righteous grievances on both sides. And so coming into a space of saying, I was scared, I did this thing, I was responding out of this, I projected onto you, I thought you were doing it, right? And yet, and kind of acknowledging and apologizing for the impact of our actions, as opposed to saying, oh, I meant to do this on purpose and that's why I did it, right? And then seeing other people in the same light, that person was working through their own stuff, and that what they were doing says more about what they're going through than it does about me, right? These are just kind of moments where we begin to have those types of more open, honest conversations. Quarantine, right? It's this moment of taking someone out to coffee and saying, what you said hurt me, and the two of you listening and talking about it, right? It's acknowledging that we cause pain, and that pain is caused to us, and that we can begin to have conversations around it. And acknowledging it, as opposed to acting like we are Teflon and that nothing hurts us and that everything is fine, right? It's sitting down with your group and talking about the source of the conflict. And this takes skills, though calling in. This is a quick plug-in for next week's talk. We're going to be talking about calling in, but this does take skillfulness as well as going out with a friend, and that takes some skills too. And we could talk about what skills would be needed for those types of conversations, but it's being open and willing to having those types of conversations. A quick story for me, I was in a kind of equity working group on a campus, and we were about 16 of us. We were all sitting around, and we were talking about these types of very issues and talking about these concepts. And this is an example of emptying that I've experienced. I have a couple of different examples, but this one stands out to me because it's a group. And as we were talking, it was noticed that there were 4 male folks in the room, and the other folks were women folks. And as we were sitting there, the men were talking the whole time, just myself included. I was included in that, right? Right? And so as that dynamic occurred, right, if this were the chaos pseudo community, right, it would just happen, and then the meeting would be over, and then that's it, right? But as a group, we were committed to these types of ideas. And so what happened was the dynamic got named in the meeting, live, in person, right? And someone said, I feel like this is a dynamic happening, that the men are taking up all the space in the room. And so our group leader, who was amazing, stopped everything, right? Stopped everything and said, okay, let's go around and hear from everyone and see how they feel. Let's do a check-in. So we spent the next 45 minutes doing a check-in with every single individual in the room, right? And some folks were like, I'm fine. I'm not talking because I don't feel like talking and I'm tired, right? And other folks were like, I'm so glad someone finally said this. This is every meeting I go to on campus is always like, right? There were multiple, the whole spectrum, right? But what happened was this was a moment of emptying, right? Where we all came as a group and talked about the source of what was going on, right? And some of the people that were being named in the dynamic were defensive because like, well, I think that, you know, if you want to talk, you should talk. It's a free country, that type of thing, right? Other people were like, yeah, I'm a part of the problem and I'm sorry about that and I want to do better. And so we kind of just went through the check-in, right? And then I think the brilliant move that the leader kind of did was to ask, okay, we've named this dynamic that is appearing for a number of us in this space. What do we want to do about it? Right? Which that to me is that question of values, right? Who do we want to be? This is who we are right now. This is how we are. This is what our dynamic is, right? Is this the way we want to be? If we're good with this dynamic continuing, then let's not change anything. We'll just keep doing what we're doing and show up every couple of weeks and do this working group and, you know, have these same talking dynamics and just not change anything, right? But what it did for us as a group was it gave us a moment, right, to kind of consider, is the kind of way we're just like, kind of like moving through the meeting or whatever, in a kind of like natural way, is that the way we want to continue to do things? Or could doing it in a different way actually lead to a kind of true community, right? A deeper sense of belonging. And really, that's really what that did, is that it cracked open the facade of like, we're all equity woke folks and we all do this stuff and we're all woke and, you know, wokety woke, right? And even in the midst of all our wokety wokeness, right, we were still replicating these dynamics. Now, if we cannot name that we're replicating the dynamics, right, that doesn't matter how woke we are. One of the things Veronica, who started Ally Path, says is, you know, she likes to move away from woke and kind of say we're always constantly waking up, right? And it's coming from the space of humility. Like, I don't know what I don't know, and these systems are in my body, they're in the culture, they're in everywhere, and so if I find myself, Justin, replicating one of these systems in a meeting like this, I really shouldn't be that surprised, right? Because it's part of how I was culturated. It's how I was built in some ways, right? And so extricating, getting that out of me is going to take time and it's going to take practice, but you can't extricate something you don't name. You can't do anything about something that you're ignoring, right? And just because you're a wokety woke space, right? Or you're in an equity group or whatever, right? Doesn't mean you're not going to be replicating the systems that you're there to kind of overturn. And so this model kind of puts that out there and saying that this is already going to be there already, right? And so that we can lean into it and kind of be like, oh, okay, all right. If this is so, now what? Right? And there's grace and compassion and everything for everyone involved. Now that we can do that, we're not going to move towards shame, we're going to move towards solutions, right? What kinds of people do we want to be? Right? We're all different, right? And that's okay. And we get to co-create who we want to be together. So in this stage, right? Let me finish that story real quick. So that wasn't the end of the story, right? We had this moment of like catharsis, right? Of like, we all feel better, right? We walked out of the meeting and everyone was just like, it was like a slow-mo montage of like high fives and everything, you know, like that kind of thing. Like, we did it, you know, like, and then it freezes, you know, at the end of the episode, 30 minutes or 25 minutes plus commercials and we're done, right? The problem is solved. Like a sitcom. But next episode, the next time we met together, guess what happened? The same thing happened again. Like almost like deja vu, like sitting in the space, the same thing happened, even though we had just talked about it, right? And so that's another thing about emptying, is that it sometimes takes cycles, multiple cycles of moving through this process. And so it becomes not a goal, not a destination, but a practice, right? Some of you have a mindfulness practice, right? It's the same thing. For me, mindfulness is not something I do once and then I'm good. It's something I do all the time to bring me back to the kind of place where I want to be. And this is the same thing, right? And so we had to have the same thing happen in the next meeting. Again, the leader paused everything and we spent 45 minutes doing another check-in. Now, for some of us, that's going to drive us up a wall, right? Because we have agendas, we have things to do, we got things to accomplish, right? And that's a little bit where some of these systems, right, begin to work themselves out and maintain themselves. Even in equity, wokey woke spaces, I like that word today, I don't know why. But even in those spaces, right, the systems begin to kind of stay the same because we're sort of like, well, we got the agenda, we got it, right? When really, like, what we're here for is to change the way we are and the way we are together, right? That's kind of what my understanding of what this is. If we cannot change the way we are with each other, how are we supposed to kind of like scale that up? What are we bringing that's different if we're acting the ways in which we don't want to act, right? In these kind of smaller spaces. What's true at the smaller level becomes true at the larger level, right? So that's kind of, so we kind of went through it again, and you know, we had to continue to come back to it and ask ourselves, hey, let's do a check. Are we doing the same thing, right? But it took a commitment to this type of process and seeing it as being part of the goal, right? Not just getting through the content, but having the spaciousness to be able to talk about things. So we talk about getting rid of barriers, right, to communication, and asking, like, how do we have these spaces for honest conversation, and moving from rugged to soft individualism, which is a term that he uses. I think it's interesting because he's basically saying we don't have to be tough, right, in these spaces, right? It's an opportunity to say, I don't feel heard, I don't feel seen, right? And creating a container, right, and again, this takes skills and tools, which we'll talk about next week. Like creating these spaces where we can shift from, you know what, it's all, I just gotta watch out for me, I gotta watch my back, I can't really, you know, look out for anybody else, right? To a softer kind of individualism that says, yes, my needs and everything, they're very important, and I do need to set boundaries, and how do I bring myself more holistically into this space as a whole person? And so the most common barriers to this type of communication that we're talking about in terms of emptying are expectations, right? In which we go into a space, again, this is going back to more of a chaos way of thinking of like expecting everyone to think the way we do. Preconceptions, right? We come in and we think, you know what, that person fits this demographic, right? So they're automatically going to think this, right? And you kind of write them off in your mind before you even begin, right? That doesn't help with this process. That's what the check-in is for, is to actually ask, does everyone in the room feel this dynamic and is upset with it? And some people were like, yes, and some people were like, no, right? And that's real. That's the reality, right? As opposed to the preconception of like, well, if you fit this demographic or this identity category, then you automatically feel this way, right? Let's check in, right? Prejudices, right? Again, that's kind of prejudging before we know what people think. Ideology, kind of assuming that our ideology is the one that's going to be the way forward. Solutions, right? When we're in emptying phase, it's not necessarily about solutions first. It's about kind of putting everything on the table. Again, the need to heal, convert, fix, or solve. In that space, when I was naming it, it wasn't about healing the other people in the room, right? It was about naming what was in the room and what everybody was feeling. Everyone, in some senses, is responsible for their own healing journey and process, right? as I am, as you are, right? But we're kind of naming, this is where, in our current state where we are with our own journey, this is where we are, as opposed to, what can I do to fix them or get them up to par or get them up to speed or whatever. I'm actually looking at myself and saying, here's what I need potentially in this moment from the group, right? And finally, the need, not that maybe finally, but like the need to control, like I need to control the outcome, right? And the uncertainty of a 45-minute check-in session, let me tell you, there is some anxiety there because you don't know what people are going to say. Because we have been in those meetings where things are a little bit more open and people start talking, and then, you know, the roof blows off and then we have to just deal with the mess afterwards. And so having some kind of skills, again, is helpful for this. So let's see. During the stage of emptiness, the pain of emptying requires a group to go through like a metaphorical death process. And when I say death, I don't mean like it says metaphorical, right? It doesn't mean actual, but there is a kind of, anytime you hit conflict, right? The idea of who you thought these people were is gone. Like you can't go back, right? You can't go, once you have that meeting and the things are said, you can't undo that, right? And so you can choose to either go back to pseudo community or go through the pain of emptying, right? Those are the kind of the fork in the road moment. And it's not comfortable. It's very uncomfortable. And yet so is going back, right? And so I think this is what always the invitation is with this is, right? When we see these moments in which we could do emptying, what do we do? Because in this type of space, the group is in agony, right? We don't like the disruption. And so the temptation may be to exit the process because of the discomfort. You know what, let's get back to the agenda. We got lots to do today. This is just too much. We don't have the space for this. We got lots to do, right? It's kind of equivalent of saying, when things get back to normal, what is normal, right? What if normal was the pseudo community? What if normal was the thing that was not working, right? Then what? What are our options? And I think this is where Peck offers some interesting ways forward, because I think that moment is a potential moment of despair, right? Because if the way things have worked are not working, what do we do? I once had a client ask me this, like, I get it. She was like, I get it, Justin. These old ways are garbage. They're trash, right? They're informed by all these systems of oppression. But what else do you expect me to do? Like, what other options do we have? And, you know, there's multiple answers to this question. This is just one of them, right? But I think that question, I think, is such an honest one, and I want to name it as being one that I struggle with too. Because as we think about this emptiness, this type of emptying, sacrificing, can be sacrificing towards something, into community, as opposed to going through a lot of discomfort to go back to the way things were. The metaphor that I like for this, and I'm going to show a little video here, is the butterfly, right? I like this with my kids because it's such a natural, like, it's a natural state thing, right? It's not political, right? This is just nature, right? If you think about butterflies and caterpillars and the whole process, right? I'm gonna be quiet for a second. I'm gonna let the video play because it's kind of cute. So what I love about this video, right, is that when we think about the true community process, the emptying phase is the cocoon phase, right? The chaos and the emptying are kind of like the cocoon phase, right? You have to go internal, you have to liquefy. Everything gets liquefied, everything gets deconstructed. And I'm assuming it's not comfortable for a caterpillar to do that, right? I'm just assuming. Maybe there's like, you know, natural painkillers involved or something. I don't know, but there's a deconstruction that occurs in that process, right? So that a new, better thing can be built. Not so that he can go back to being a caterpillar, or she, or they, or it, or I don't know what the pronouns are for a caterpillar, right? But like moving backwards, right? We don't want to, it's not to go back to the leaf, right? The whole goal is to fly. The leaf is great, right? You get to eat as much as you want. It's got the green leaf. It's so cool, right? And in the mind of the caterpillar, I could see a caterpillar being like, look, do I really have to go through all that pain and deconstruction and all that stuff and put myself in the thing for what? The leaf is great, right? But the calling, the invitation, right, is that, have you ever flown before? Oh, you haven't? Oh, wait till you fly. Oh, you think the leaf is great. Imagine going to any leaf you want, right? You can go anywhere. You're not stuck on the leaf. You can move, you can adapt, you can shift, you can go whatever comes with you. You're not in a golf cart anymore, right? You're teleporting. That's the difference, right? You're able to do whatever you want. Oh, I want to be up there. I'll go up there, right? That's kind of the invitation. And so that's kind of where I think that's a great example of what true community maybe can look like, right? Or like the hope, the vision of it. It's like once we empty ourselves of judgments and desires, we can quickly move into community. And again, this is not like we move into the community and we're done, right? What I explained as like the high fives and the like freeze frame at the end of the episode type thing was real community, right? I'm still friends with those people. Not like work friends, but like friends, like, you know what I'm saying? Because of what we went through. But we also had to do it again and again and again, and that was part of the process as well. So they're both true at the same time, as opposed to an either or. True community is hard to describe because we don't really have a lot of examples for it. We don't, not many of us have not really experienced, especially at work. Are you kidding me? At work? No, like that's typically not where we find true community, right? But there's invitation, there's opportunity to find it at work, right? And the thing is that it looks like four, or it looks like one, but it feels completely different. It's one thing to say, hey, how you doing, right? And to be able to say, I'm really struggling right now. My mom is sick and like, I got a lot going on and, you know, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. How can I support you today? Do you need me to take something off your plate? Let me help you. How can I help you? Not just talk, right? Action. I got you. Right? That's the difference, right? Whereas in stage one, it's like, hey, how you doing? All right, have a good day. Let's go to lunch. And then you never go to lunch, right? That's stage one. Stage four is actually helping, right? It's actually being there, it's supporting one another. It's built on honesty, not fake smiles, right? And again, this takes some skill, right? We got to build skill around this because again, it's not something we're taught. And so we can build skill on how to do this skillfully with skillful means. And it can be an alternative to the fake smiles, right? That we talk about. Another thing is people aren't being silent and fuming, because going back to those chaos meetings that we talked about where like everyone's like, what is happening right now? For every person, for every one person that's like, right? There are 7 people in there who are just quietly angry. Angry that they're there, angry because they feel uncomfortable, angry that this is happening, angry that someone's not doing something to stop this, right? Angry that we don't have a means by which we can work through this, that we just keep having the same thing every department, division, whatever section meeting, right? And one of the key things of one of the ways of knowing that, and maybe you're this person, right? Your way of dealing with chaos and not having a system of working it through is to be like, you know what? When that clock hits 12, I am out the door. right? And we see this all the time. You know, I'm this way. This is the way I typically deal with stuff before I had this framework, especially in some of this work, was I would be like, I gotta go pick up my kids, right? And I would always have to pick up my kids, no matter what time it was. That's always what I had to go do, right? Because what are you gonna say? Like, I can't pick up my kids? Like, I gotta go do that. And if it's during a work day, right, I say I gotta go work on something. I got class. I got something to do, right? And I actually scheduled things at the end of meetings so that I wouldn't have to stay longer. I'd have a reason to leave, right? Because I was just so frustrated and upset and felt helpless about being able to do anything, right? Now, the downside of this is when we talk about diversity, one of the things that we think about with diversity is that it's having lots of different types of people in a space, right? But if you don't hear from those people because they're silent and fuming, you don't mind the resource of diversity. Like, if you only have three people talking and the other people are upset and not talking, the diversity almost loses its quote unquote value in that sense, right? And so community doesn't have that. People are able to share what they're thinking. But this is the way Peck describes it, and it does, I get it, it sounds a little corny and cheesy, but it's aspirational, right? That's kind of the point. Look at us all here together, and then that's kind of the vision of it, right? And over time, the group may slip back into chaos phase, as we talked about, and have to work their way back through emptying the true community. But what you have once you've done it once is you have a model, you have a system, you have a way of doing it, and you begin to develop skills around how to do it in a way that keeps everyone safe, right? While also going through the process. Life in community is not easier, right? It still requires a lot of work, but it's more lively, and it's more intense, right? And then the agony is greater, but so is the joy, right? And these are all kind of points he makes at the end. So we're gonna take a quick break and kind of process all this stuff that we just went through. We'll do 3 minutes, come back at 11:23, and then talk a little bit about how we can apply this to our own worlds and what we're going through. So if you want to turn off your camera, that's cool. That's what I'm gonna do. Take a break. Grab some water or whatever, and see you back here in 3 minutes.